The year was 2087, and Earth had been part of the Galactic Confederation for 30 years. Most humans had gotten used to seeing alien beings walking among them, but the relationship between Earth and the other worlds remained tense. Many alien species looked down on humans as newcomers who didn't deserve their place at the galactic table. Jonathan Vance, known to friends and family as JD, stood at the window of his laboratory in Columbus, Ohio. The city skyline had changed dramatically in recent decades, with sleek buildings that incorporated alien architectural influences rising alongside the old human structures. JD ran his hand through his dark hair, streaked with early gray at the temples despite being only 42 years old. Stress had taken its toll over the past few months of intense work. On the holographic display behind him floated the schematics for his life's work, a revolutionary propulsion system that could change humanity's place in the stars. Unlike the current drives that required rare minerals from distant systems, JD's design used commonly available materials and novel mathematics to achieve even greater speeds. "Final simulation complete," announced the lab's AI assistant. "All parameters within projected tolerances. Design is ready for prototype construction." JD allowed himself a small smile. After 5 years of work, countless failures, and sleepless nights, he had done it. A propulsion system designed by human hands that could outperform anything the Centaurians had shared with Earth. Not that they had shared much. The older alien civilization kept their best technology for themselves while claiming to be generous mentors to humanity. "Send the completion notice to NASA and the Defense Department," JD said, "and call Olivia. Tell her I'm finally coming home tonight." 2 hours later, JD pulled his electric car into the driveway of his suburban home. The modest 2-story house looked the same as its neighbors, except for the small greenhouse dome in the backyard where Olivia grew both earth plants and a few alien varieties that had become popular for cooking. His wife stepped onto the porch, her smile brighter than the porch lights. At 40, Olivia Vance remained as beautiful to JD as the day they met in college. Her brown hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and she wore the comfortable clothes of someone who worked from home, designing educational programs for schools. "The conquering hero returns," Olivia said, embracing him. "Megan's been asking when Dad would emerge from his cave of science." Their 14-year-old daughter appeared in the doorway, looking up briefly from her handheld device. "Did you make the super rocket work, Dad?" she asked, trying to sound casual but unable to hide her interest. "It's not a rocket, it's a—" JD began automatically, then laughed. "Yes, the final simulations just passed. We can start building it next month." Megan gave him a quick hug before returning to her room to message her friends with the news. Her father's work made her popular at school, even if she pretended not to care. The family enjoyed a quiet dinner together, the first in weeks. JD felt the tension of years melting from his shoulders as he ate real food instead of the nutrient bars he survived on in the lab. They talked about normal things: Megan's studies, Olivia's new educational program about alien cultures, neighborhood gossip. No one mentioned the significance of what JD had accomplished, but they all knew. If it worked, humans would no longer depend on Centaurian technology for interstellar travel. The peaceful evening was shattered by a loud bang at the front. Before JD could rise from his seat, the door crashed open. 6 figures rushed in. 4 human security officers in Earth government uniforms flanked by 2 tall, blue-skinned Zorlian peace officers with their characteristic crystalline body armor. "Jonathan Vance," announced the lead human officer. "By authority of the Galactic Confederation Technology Treaty, you are under arrest for illegal appropriation of protected technological knowledge." Olivia stood up so quickly her chair fell backward. "What are you talking about? My husband has done nothing wrong." The Zorlian officer stepped forward, his translator device converting his clicking language to English. "Human Vance has stolen classified propulsion designs belonging to the Centaurian Technological Authority. The evidence is clear. He will face trial before Judge Kravzik of the Confederation Court." JD felt the blood drain from his face. "That's impossible. My work is original. Every equation, every component was developed here, by humans." "Dad?" Megan's voice sounded small and frightened from the hallway where she stood watching. "The human Officer looked uncomfortable. I'm sorry, Mr. Vance, the complaint comes directly from the Centaurian ambassador. We have to take you in. There will be a formal hearing on Luna next week. You can't do this, Olivia protested, stepping between the officers and her husband. He's worked independently for years. Check his research logs. The second Zorlian moved forward, towering over Olivia. The logs will be examined at trial. Interference with this arrest is a secondary offense, human female. JD gently moved his wife aside. It's okay, Liv. This is clearly a mistake. I'll go with them. We'll clear this up. He lowered his voice. Call Pat Caldwell. She knows Confederation law. And contact Sam at NASA. He has all my original research notes. As the officers led JD away, he looked back at his family. Olivia stood straight, trying to appear strong for Megan, who had begun to cry. It's going to be okay, he called back. The truth is on our side. The next morning, news of JD's arrest spread across Earth's networks and colonies. The story was the same everywhere. Prominent human engineer arrested for stealing alien technology. Some reports painted him as a thief trying to pass off Centaurian designs as his own. Others suggested he was being framed because his work threatened Centaurian technological dominance. In the cold holding cell on Luna, Earth's moon where the Confederation maintained its local headquarters, JD met with Patricia Caldwell, a gray-haired attorney who had specialized in interspecies law since first contact. They've fast-tracked your case, Pat said grimly. Judge Kravzik himself will preside. He's notorious for ruling against humans. But the evidence, I've reviewed everything they claim to have. They're saying your mathematical models match protected Centaurian formulas with a 94% correlation. The problem is those formulas are classified. We can't even see what they're comparing your work to. JD leaned forward, his voice intense. That's because they stole the basics from us in the first place. The foundation of my work builds on Dr. Eleanor Wright's theoretical papers from before first contact. The Centaurians classified those papers after they arrived. They're using our own math against us. Pat nodded slowly. That's exactly what we need to prove, but all of Dr. Wright's original work was collected and supposedly preserved by the Centaurians decades ago. Outside the detention center, protests had begun. Humans and a few sympathetic alien species gathered with signs demanding JD's release. The case was quickly becoming a symbol of the unequal relationship between humanity and the older galactic civilizations. In the Vance home back on Earth, Olivia fielded constant messages from supporters and media outlets. She had transformed their living room into a command center, coordinating with NASA officials and independent scientists who believed in her husband's innocence. Mom? Megan stood in the doorway, looking more serious than any 14-year-old should need to be. Is Dad going to go to alien jail? Olivia crossed the room and hugged her daughter tightly. Not if I have anything to say about it. Your father is brilliant and his work is honest. We just need to prove it. Megan pulled back, her young face determined. How can I help? Olivia smiled for the first time in days. You can start by helping me sort through these messages. We're looking for anyone who might have copies of Dr. Wright's original papers. The truth is out there, and we're going to find it. As the sun set over Columbus, the Vance women worked together, determined to save JD from becoming another human sacrifice to keep the peace with the powerful alien civilizations who claimed to be their friends. The Confederation courthouse on Luna gleamed like a giant crystal under the harsh sunlight. Built from materials brought from a dozen worlds, it stood as a symbol of galactic unity. For J.D. Vance, however, it felt more like a trap as guards led him through its gleaming hallways. 1 week had passed since his arrest. J.D. had spent that time in a holding cell, allowed only brief calls with Olivia and meetings with Pat Caldwell. His trial was set to begin today, faster than normal procedure allowed. The Centaurians had pushed for quick judgment. The courtroom itself was designed to accommodate many different species. The judge's platform stood higher than everything else, emphasizing the power of whoever sat there. Rows of seats made for various body types filled the public section. A transparent barrier separated the audience from the trial floor. J.D. looked up as Judge Kravzik entered. The Zorlian stood nearly 7 feet tall, his blue skin almost metallic under the lights. 4 arms emerged from his ceremonial robe, each ending in 3-fingered hands. His face, with its large black eyes and small mouth, showed no emotion as he took his seat. This court will now hear the case of the Centaurian Technological Authority versus human Jonathan Vance, announced the court officer. The translation system echoed the words in 6 different languages. Pat Caldwell stood beside JD at the defense table. Across the room, the prosecution team was led by Gestal, an Andromedan known for winning cases against humans. The tall, thin alien had gray skin that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "The charges are serious," Judge Kravzik began, his translator converting his clicks and whistles into English. "Theft of protected technological designs violates Section 47 of the Technology Sharing Treaty. If found guilty, the human faces 20 standard years in the Proxima detention facility." JD felt a chill run through him. The Proxima facility was notorious. Few humans sent there ever returned to Earth. Gestal rose to present the prosecution's case. "Honored Judge, the evidence is clear. The propulsion system designed by human Vance uses mathematical principles identical to classified Centaurian technology. Such similarity cannot be coincidence." A holographic display appeared in the center of the courtroom. Complex equations floated in the air, highlighted in different colors to show the similarities between JD's work and the Centaurian designs. JD leaned toward Pat and whispered, "This is the first time I'm seeing their equations. Those are basic principles any physicist would use." Pat nodded but signaled for him to remain quiet. Gestal continued, "Furthermore, the human has connections to individuals who had access to our protected knowledge. We believe the theft occurred over several years disguised as independent research." When Pat's turn came, she approached the display with confidence. "Your Honor, similarity is not theft. My client developed his work from purely human mathematical foundations. The equations shown here are universal principles that any advanced civilization would discover independently." Judge Kravzik made a dismissive gesture with one of his 4 hands. "The Centaurians discovered these principles 300 years ago. Humans have been space-capable for less than a century." "With respect, Your Honor," Pat replied, "humans had these mathematical concepts before first contact. My client based his work on theories published by Dr. Eleanor Wright of MIT in 2051, 15 years before we met the Centaurians." The judge's eyes narrowed. "Those papers were collected and classified for human safety. No copies should exist." JD could not remain silent at this. "You classified our own research? How is that legal?" "The human will not speak out of turn," Judge Kravzik snapped, all 4 arms raising in warning. Back on Earth, Olivia Vance sat in NASA Administrator Samuel Grant's office. The tall, broad-shouldered man with salt and pepper hair had been JD's supervisor and friend for years. "They're not even pretending to give him a fair trial," Olivia said, her voice tight with anger. "Sam, we need those original papers by Dr. Wright. JD said they're the key to proving his innocence." Sam nodded grimly. "We've had a team searching the archives since his arrest. The Centaurians were thorough when they collected all of Wright's work, but they missed something." He slid a data tablet across the desk. "One of her students kept personal notes from her lectures. Not complete, but enough to show the core mathematics originated with her." "Will it be enough?" Olivia asked, hope rising in her voice. "I don't know. I've sent it to Pat Caldwell, but Judge Kravzik has already refused 2 of our evidence submissions. He claims Earth documents aren't valid unless verified by Confederation experts." Olivia's hands clenched into fists. "This isn't justice. It's a show trial." On Luna, JD found an unexpected ally. During a recess, he was using the courthouse restroom when a maintenance worker entered. The man, whose badge identified him as Kyle Martinez, pretended to check the fixtures while speaking, quietly. "I believe you," Kyle said, not looking directly at JD. "My sister works at the propulsion lab in Mars Colony. She says your design is nothing like the Centaurian drives they use." JD glanced at the door, making sure they were alone. Thanks, but belief won't help without proof. Kyle's voice dropped even lower. I can help you access the courthouse archives. There are records of other cases like yours, species who developed technology the Centaurians claimed as their own. That would be illegal, JD said, though his heart raced at the possibility. So is framing an innocent man. Kyle slipped a small device into JD's hand. Tonight, when they take you back to your cell, this will override the door lock for 30 minutes. The archives are 3 levels down. Use access code 9271. Before JD could respond, Kyle left, resuming his normal duties as if nothing had happened. That night, JD faced a difficult choice. Using the device meant risking worse punishment if caught. Not using it might mean losing, his one chance to find evidence that could save him. At midnight, when the guard patrols changed shifts, JD made his decision. He activated the device, watching nervously as his cell door slid open silently. The corridor outside was empty. Moving as quietly as possible, JD made his way to the service elevator Kyle had described. His heart pounded so loudly he was sure someone would hear it. Following Kyle's instructions, he reached the archives without encountering anyone. The archive room was dark, lit only by the glow of data terminals. JD entered the access code and began searching for cases involving technology disputes. What he found shocked him. Over the past 300 years, 12 different species had been accused of stealing Centaurian technology. In each case, the defendants were found guilty despite their claims of independent development. JD discovered something even more disturbing. Internal Centaurian communications revealed a deliberate policy of suppressing technological advancement in younger species. They classified and controlled knowledge to maintain their position as technological leaders in the Confederation. JD downloaded as much information as he could onto the device Kyle had given him. As he finished, he heard voices approaching. Guards were coming early. He barely made it back to his cell before the patrol passed, closing the door just in time. Lying on his bed, heart still racing, JD knew he had found something important. The Centaurians weren't just accusing him of theft. They were following a centuries-old pattern of keeping other species dependent on them. Now he needed to find a way to use this information before Judge Kravzik announced his verdict. The next morning, JD managed to pass the device to Pat during a brief meeting. Everything I found is on here, he whispered. They've done this before many times. It's their standard practice. Pat nodded slightly. I'll get this to Olivia. She and Administrator Grant have found something too. Notes from Dr. Wright's original lectures, but we need to be careful. The judge has rejected all our previous evidence. As the second day of the trial began, JD noticed more people in the audience. News of his case had spread throughout human colonies. Even some alien observers had come, curious about the human who dared to challenge Centaurian technological superiority. What none of them knew yet was that the real struggle was just beginning. Miles away, in Earth's Defense Headquarters, Lieutenant Commander Heather Powell received unusual orders regarding her ship, the Intrepid. Orders that would soon connect with JD's fate in ways no one could predict. The third day of the trial began with tension filling the courtroom. More spectators packed the public section than before. News of the case had spread across Earth's colonies and even to other species' worlds. Many saw it as a test of whether humans could truly receive justice in the Confederation courts. JD sat beside Pat Caldwell, trying to appear calm despite his racing thoughts. The evidence he had found in the archives burned in his mind. The Centaurians had been doing this for centuries, suppressing other species' technological growth to maintain their position. Pat had tried to submit the student notes from Dr. Wright's lectures as evidence, but Judge Kravzik had rejected them. Unverified human documents cannot be admitted without Confederation authentication, the judge had ruled, his forearms moving in dismissive gestures. Gustal, the Andromedan prosecutor, rose to call his final witness, a Centaurian engineer named Vrelth. The tall, golden-skinned alien took the stand with smooth confidence. Explain to the court why human Vance's design must be stolen, Gustal directed. Vrelth's voice came through the translators with a musical quality. The mathematical principles are too advanced for human discovery. Our scientists required 150 years to develop these equations. Humans have been in space less than 1 century. It is simply impossible for them to reach this level without assistance. JD felt anger rising in his chest. The arrogance of the statement was breathtaking. When Pat cross-examined the witness, she approached from a new angle. Is it true that Centaurian ships use rare minerals from the Orion sector for their propulsion systems? Vrelth seemed confused by the question. Yes, certain elements are required. And is it also true that Mr. Vance's design uses no such materials, instead functioning with elements commonly found on Earth? That is a simplification, but essentially correct. Pat pressed further. So his design is actually quite different from yours in practical application? The core mathematics are what matter, Vrelth insisted. Those are clearly taken from our work. Or perhaps, Pat suggested, your people took them from early human theoretical work and built upon it, only to classify the original human papers afterward. Judge Kravzik interrupted sharply. The defense will not make unfounded accusations against a senior member race of the Confederation. Pat returned to her seat beside JD. I planted the seed, she whispered. Some of the observers are starting to question the Centaurian claims. After the day's session ended, JD was led back to his cell. The guards seemed less friendly than before, watching him more closely. Had they discovered his nighttime visit to the archives? He couldn't be sure. On board the Earth Defense Force vessel Intrepid, orbiting Mars, Lieutenant Commander Heather Powell stood in her private quarters reading a highly encrypted message for the 3rd time. The sender was identified only as Patriot, but the authentication codes were legitimate. High-level Earth government security. This can't be right, she murmured to herself. The orders outlined a completely unauthorized mission: intercept a prisoner transport bound for Proxima Centauri and extract Jonathan Vance. Attached to the orders was a file containing evidence from the courthouse archives, the same information JD had discovered about the Centaurian pattern of suppression, plus additional data proving that Dr. Wright's mathematical work predated Centaurian claims. Powell was a career officer with 16 years of service. Following these orders could end that career, or worse. But if the evidence was genuine, grave injustice was being committed against not just Vance, but humanity itself. She pressed the communication panel. Tactical Officer Delgado, report to my quarters immediately. Secure channel. Back on Luna, Judge Kravzik prepared to announce his verdict. The courtroom fell silent as the tall Zorlian judge activated his translator. This court has reviewed all admissible evidence in the case of the Centaurian Technological Authority versus human Jonathan Vance. The charge is theft of protected technological knowledge in violation of Section 47 of the Technology Sharing Treaty. JD felt a cold weight in his stomach. The word admissible told him everything. None of the evidence supporting his innocence had been allowed. The similarities between the human's design and protected Centaurian technology cannot be explained by coincidence or parallel development. This court finds the human Jonathan Vance guilty as charged. A wave of shouts and protests erupted from the human observers. Judge Kravzik's forearms raised, demanding silence. The sentence is 20 standard years in the Proxima detention facility. The human's propulsion design will be classified and turned over to Centaurian authorities for proper handling. The prisoner will be transported immediately to avoid any further complications. Pat jumped to her feet. We demand the right to appeal. This verdict ignores crucial evidence. There is no appeal process for technology treaty violations, Judge Kravzik stated coldly. The matter is settled. Guards moved toward JD. As they grabbed his arms, he looked directly at the judge and spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. The truth doesn't need permission to exist, he said firmly. You can jail me, but you can't jail human innovation. We'll discover these principles again and again, no matter how many times you try to hide them. The courtroom erupted once more as JD was led away. Some aliens joined the humans in protest, particularly representatives of younger species who had faced similar treatment from the Centaurians. On Earth, Olivia Vance watched the verdict in horror from NASA headquarters. Beside her, Administrator, Grant received an urgent message on his secure tablet. His eyes widened as he read it. "Olivia," he said quietly. "We just received confirmation. The mathematical proofs in question, they definitely originated in Eleanor Wright's work. We found a complete copy of her original papers in an old university archive in Australia. The Centaurians missed it when they collected and classified her work." Olivia's hand shook as she took the tablet. "It proves JD's innocence. We have to send this to the Confederation Council immediately." "I already have," Grant assured her. "But there's more." He hesitated, then continued in an even, lower voice. "Certain elements within Earth's government have decided we can't trust the Confederation justice system. Alternative measures are being considered." "What does that mean?" Olivia asked, hope and fear competing in her voice. "It means, don't give up hope," Grant said, placing a supportive hand on her shoulder. "And be ready to move quickly if you receive certain instructions." That evening, news of JD's conviction spread across human settlements throughout the solar system. Protests erupted at Confederation embassies and offices. On Mars Colony, hundreds of humans and even some sympathetic aliens gathered outside the Centaurian trade mission, demanding JD's release. Olivia Vance addressed the public through global networks, her face showing determination despite her fear. "My husband is innocent. The evidence proves it. The Centaurians have classified human research to prevent us from advancing, then accused us of stealing when we rediscover our own work." She held up the recovered papers. "These are Dr. Eleanor Wright's original equations from 2051, 15 years before we met the Centaurians. They're the foundation of JD's design. The Centaurians knew this, which is why they collected and classified all copies they could find after first contact." As Olivia spoke, JD was being led aboard a prisoner transport vessel bound for Proxima Centauri. The small utilitarian ship had minimal crew, 2 Zorlian guards and a Centaurian pilot. JD's hands were bound with energy restraints that prevented him from moving more than a few inches. "Sit down and be quiet, human," one guard ordered. "It's a long journey to your new home." JD did as he was told, his mind racing. Was this really how it would end? 20 years in an alien prison while the Centaurians claimed his work as their own? He thought of Olivia and Megan, wondering if his daughter would be an adult before he saw her again. As the transport prepared to leave lunar orbit, JD had no way of knowing that Lieutenant Commander Powell and the Intrepid had altered course and were now on an intercept trajectory. The next 24 hours would change not just his fate, but potentially the balance of power in the entire Confederation. The prisoner transport vessel moved slowly away from lunar orbit. Inside, JD sat with his back against the cold metal wall, energy restraints still binding his wrists. The 2 Zorlian guards paid little attention to him. They considered a single, human prisoner. No threat. JD looked out the small viewing port at Earth growing smaller in the distance. Would he ever see his home planet again? The thought of Olivia and Megan waiting 20 years for his return filled him with a deep sadness. The pilot's cabin, the Centaurian navigator plotted their course to Proxima Centauri. The journey would take 10 days using standard drives. The ship's communication system pinged with an incoming message. "Transport Vessel 47, this is Earth Defense Force Ship Intrepid," came a woman's voice over the channel. "We are approaching. Your position and request that you hold your current location for inspection." The Centaurian pilot looked confused. "Inspection? There is no scheduled inspection for prisoner transports." "New Confederation security protocols," replied the voice. "Recent concerns about prisoner treatment require verification before leaving Earth orbit." The pilot consulted with the senior Zorlian guard. Earth vessels had no authority over Confederation transports, but refusing inspection could create a diplomatic incident. Lieutenant Commander Heather Powell stood on the bridge of the Intrepid, her expression calm despite the tension she felt. What she was doing violated at least 6 regulations and could be considered an act of war against the Confederation. Yet the evidence she had received convinced her the cause was just. "They're not responding, Commander," reported her communications. Officer Powell nodded. "Move us into blocking position. Tactical Officer Delgado, prepare boarding team." Frank Delgado, a stocky man with 15 years of military experience, checked his equipment one final time. His team of 6 soldiers wore light combat armor and carried non-lethal weapons. Their orders were clear. Extract Jonathan Vance with minimal force. Transport Vessel 47, this is your final warning, Powell announced. Power down your engines and prepare for boarding, or we will be forced to disable your propulsion systems. On the transport, the Centaurian pilot became agitated. They cannot do this, it violates Confederation law. He began to accelerate the ship. Target their engine housing only, Powell ordered. Precision fire. The Intrepid's weapons officer fired a single pulse that struck the transport's engine section. The smaller vessel shuddered and its lights flickered. JD felt the impact and grabbed the wall to steady himself. The guards looked at each other in alarm, their translator devices chattering as they discussed what to do. What's happening? JD asked, but they ignored him. The transport's engines shut down completely after the hit. Before the crew could react, they felt the metallic thud of docking clamps attaching to their hull. Boarding teams, go, Powell ordered. Delgado and his team moved through the airlock and into the transport vessel. The first guard who tried to stop them was stunned by a non-lethal pulse weapon. The second guard raised his hands in surrender, realizing he was outnumbered. The Centaurian pilot attempted to send a distress signal, but the Intrepid was jamming all communications. Delgado reached the main holding area where he found JD still, restrained. Jonathan Vance? Delgado asked, though he recognized JD from the mission briefing. JD nodded, confused but hopeful. Who are you? Tactical Officer Frank Delgado, Earth Defense Force. We're here to extract you. He used a small device to deactivate the energy restraints. Can you walk? Yes, JD said, rubbing his wrists as he stood. But this is illegal. The Confederation will... We have evidence proving your innocence, Delgado interrupted. Earth government has authorized this operation. We can discuss details aboard the Intrepid. They moved quickly through the transport vessel. The Centaurian pilot tried to block their path, but 2 soldiers held him back while JD and Delgado passed. This is an act of war, the Centaurian shouted. The Confederation will not tolerate this piracy. JD stopped and looked at him. It's not piracy to rescue an innocent man. Your people stole human research and then accused us of theft when we rediscovered it. Minutes later, JD stepped aboard the Intrepid. The airlock sealed behind him as the docking clamps released. The Earth vessel immediately began moving away from the disabled transport. Lieutenant Commander Powell was waiting to greet him. Mr. Vance, welcome aboard. I'm Heather Powell, commanding officer of the Intrepid. Thank you for the rescue, JD said, still trying to process what was happening. But won't this cause serious problems between Earth and the Confederation? Powell led him to the bridge. The diplomatic situation is already changing. Administrator Grant has presented Dr. Wright's original papers to several Confederation species. Many are questioning Centaurian influence over technology regulations. On the main screen, JD could see 3 Confederation security vessels changing course to pursue them. They had been patrolling near Mars and had finally noticed the incident. They're gaining on us, the navigation officer reported. Standard drives won't outrun them. Powell turned to JD with a slight smile. I understand you've designed a new propulsion system, Mr. Vance, one that doesn't require rare Centaurian minerals. JD's eyes widened. You built it? But the design wasn't even finished when I was arrested. A special team at NASA completed it based on your research. This ship was fitted with the prototype 2 days ago. We haven't tested it yet. You want to test an experimental drive while being chased by Confederation security? JD asked in disbelief. If it works, Powell said, we prove your innocence and demonstrate human innovation. If it fails, she shrugged. We'll face trial together. JD moved to the engineering station and examined the implementation of his design. The NASA team had made some modifications, but the core principles remained. It should work. Activate the Vance drive, Powell ordered. The ship hummed as power flowed to the new engines. JD held his breath, watching the energy readings. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the stars on the view screen began to blur. The Intrepid accelerated to speeds no Earth vessel had ever achieved. The Confederation pursuers fell behind rapidly, unable to match their velocity. "It works," exclaimed the engineering officer. "We're moving at 150% of Centaurian top speed." Powell ordered all sensors to record the flight data. "Broadcast our telemetry on all frequencies," she commanded. "Let everyone see what human innovation has created." As they flew, Powell explained the rest of the plan to JD. "We're not running away. Once we've demonstrated the drive's capabilities, we'll return to Earth. The evidence of Centaurian deception, combined with the public demonstration of your technology, should force the Confederation Council to review your case." JD watched Earth growing larger on the view screen as they circled back. His mind was already racing with improvements for the drive. The NASA team had done well, but he could make it even better. "What about my family?" he asked suddenly. "Olivia and Megan, are they safe?" "Administrator Grant has moved them to a secure location," Powell assured him. "Your wife has been instrumental in gathering support. Her public statements about the Centaurian classification of Dr. Wright's work have sparked protests across human colonies." As the Intrepid approached Earth orbit, they received dozens of messages from human settlements throughout the solar system. People had witnessed the ship's unprecedented speed and were celebrating what many were already calling a breakthrough for human independence. News of JD's rescue and the successful test of his drive spread quickly through the Confederation networks. Several non-aligned alien species, long suspicious of Centaurian technological gatekeeping, publicly expressed support for Earth. For the first time, JD felt real hope. The truth was finally emerging. His work wasn't just a propulsion system anymore. It had become a symbol of human potential and the fight against unjust suppression. "Incoming message from the Confederation Council," the communications officer announced. "They're demanding we surrender Mr. Vance immediately." Powell looked at JD. "What do you think? Should we comply?" JD stood straighter, finding new confidence. "No. Tell them we have evidence to present to the full council. Evidence that will change everything they thought they knew about human innovation and Centaurian honesty." 3 weeks after JD's dramatic rescue, the United Nations Grand Assembly Hall in New York City buzzed with tension. Representatives from every Earth nation and colony had gathered for an emergency session. Large screens around the hall showed alien faces, members of the Confederation Council who were attending remotely. JD stood backstage with Olivia and Megan, finally reunited after his ordeal. Olivia squeezed his hand tightly. "Are you ready for this?" she asked. Her face showed a mixture of pride and concern. JD nodded. "The truth needs to be told, not just for me but for all of humanity, and for the other species the Centaurians have suppressed." Megan hugged her father. At 14, she understood enough to know that her dad was about to do something important. "You'll be great, Dad, Administrator." Grant approached them. "It's time, JD. The Intrepid just entered Earth orbit with Lieutenant Commander Powell. The Confederation representatives are all connected. We have control of the communication channels." JD took a deep breath and stepped onto the stage. The hall fell silent as he approached the podium. Cameras broadcast his image not just to Earth and its colonies, but throughout the Confederation. "My name is Jonathan Vance," he began simply. 3 weeks ago, I was convicted of stealing Centaurian technology and sentenced to 20 years in prison. Today I stand before you to reveal the truth, not just about my case, but about a centuries-old practice of technological suppression. He activated a holographic display that showed the documents he had discovered in the courthouse archives. While in Confederation custody, I found evidence that the Centaurians have systematically accused younger species of theft whenever they develop advanced technology independently. In the past 300 years, 12 different species have faced similar charges. The Centaurian representative's image showed clear agitation. "This human is a fugitive. He has no right to address this assembly," JD continued, undeterred. "The Centaurians didn't just accuse me of stealing their mathematics. They actually took human research, specifically Dr. Eleanor Wright's groundbreaking work from 2051, classified it after first contact, and then accused us of theft when we rediscovered our own principles. Administrator Grant stepped forward, holding up the recovered papers. These are Dr. Wright's original equations. They predated first contact by 15 years. The Centaurians knew this when they accused JD of theft. From orbit, Lieutenant Commander Powell began broadcasting the performance data from the Intrepid's test flight. This is the Vance drive in action, JD explained. Built using purely human innovation, it outperforms Centaurian drives by 50% while using common materials instead of rare minerals they control. The alien representatives murmured among themselves. Several non-human faces showed clear surprise at the data. The Centaurians have maintained their position of power by controlling knowledge, JD continued. They classify crucial research from younger species, restrict our development, then punish us when we innovate independently. The Centaurian representative tried to interrupt again. These are baseless accusations. The human violated a legally binding treaty. Then explain this, JD challenged. He displayed internal Centaurian communications from the archives showing their deliberate policy of technological suppression. Your own words reveal your strategy. For centuries, you've been keeping other species dependent on you. A representative from the Arcturian species, who had previously been neutral in Confederation politics, spoke up. We experienced similar accusations 50 years ago when we developed quantum communication. Our researchers were imprisoned. Their work was classified. Other species began sharing similar stories. The pattern JD had discovered was confirmed by multiple voices across the Confederation. Judge Kravzik's image appeared on one screen. This assembly has no legal standing to override my ruling. The human remains guilty under Confederation law. A law built on deception, JD countered. You refused to admit evidence that would have proven my innocence. You rejected Dr. Wright's papers without examination. That's not justice, it's collusion. The UN Secretary General rose from her seat. The United Nations, speaking for all of humanity, calls for an immediate review of all technology-related cases judged under Confederation law. We also demand the declassification of all human research that was collected after first contact. The hall erupted in applause. Representatives from several alien species indicated their support for the motion. The Centaurian representatives' face darkened. If Earth persists in this defiance, there will be consequences. Your world remains dependent on Confederation trade and protection. JD smiled slightly. Not as dependent as you think. The Vance drive is just the beginning. Free from your restrictions, human innovation will flourish, and we're willing to share our discoveries with any species that treats us as equals. This statement caused even more excitement among the alien representatives. Many smaller species had chafed under Centaurian technological control for generations. The next few hours saw intense negotiations. The Confederation Council, faced with mounting evidence and growing support for Earth's position, convened an emergency session. Judge Kravzik faced calls for his removal and investigation for judicial misconduct. By evening, news arrived that changed everything. The Confederation's highest authority had made an unprecedented decision. JD's conviction was overturned. All charges were dismissed. Furthermore, a special committee would investigate all previous technology theft cases, as JD left the assembly hall with his family. Crowds of people cheered. Reporters shouted questions, but he only stopped briefly to make one statement. Today isn't just a victory for me or even for humanity. It's a victory for truth and fair treatment among all intelligent species. The stars belong to all of us, and knowledge shouldn't be locked away to benefit only a few. 1 year later, JD stood in his new laboratory at the International Space Agency headquarters. The walls were covered with designs and equations, many contributed by scientists from a dozen different alien species now working freely with humans. Olivia entered, carrying a tablet with the latest news. It's official, she announced. Earth has been offered a permanent seat on the Confederation High Council. JD looked up from his work. That's incredible. Who will they select as our representative? Olivia smiled. They want you, JD. The nomination came not just from Earth, but from 7 other species as well. He shook his head in amazement. From accused thief to council member in 1 year. That's quite a change. You exposed a truth that needed to be told, Olivia said. The Vance principle isn't just about propulsion technology anymore. It's become a philosophy about knowledge sharing across the galaxy. JD looked out the window at the stars. The same stars that once seemed to mark the boundaries of human potential now represented endless possibilities. I think I'll accept the nomination, he said finally. There's still so much work to do to ensure fair treatment for all species. Megan burst into the lab, excited about her own news. Dad, my science project on cross-species mathematical principles won first place. My teacher says I might be the next great Vance innovator. JD hugged his daughter, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. The future he'd helped create would be one where she could reach for the stars without artificial limitations, where human potential could finally be fully realized. As night fell over Earth, ships using the Vance drive streaked across the sky, carrying human and alien travelers between worlds that were now truly beginning to understand each other as equals. The balance of power had shifted, not through war or violence, but through the simple power of truth and innovation that refused to be suppressed. And somewhere in the vastness of space, a young species was developing its first faster-than-light theories, free from the fear that their discoveries would be classified and stolen by more powerful civilizations. The age of suppression was ending. A new era of shared knowledge had begun,